Welcome to the Springfield Township Board of Trustees meeting. It is May 12, 2020 at approximately 5:30 p.m. Would everyone, can we start off with a roll call? Mr. Burning.
Yes, Mr. Honolulu. Ms. Davis?
Present.
Mr. Burning?
Present.
Mr. Honolulu?
Present.
All the trustees are present.
And now if everyone would please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, the first thing that we have on our agenda this evening is approval of minutes from our regular session, which was held on April 14th, 2020, and our regular work session, which was held on April 28th, 2020. Do we have a motion to approve those minutes as drafted?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Next, Mr. Burning, do we have the fiscal officer's report?
Yes, Mr. Honolulu. For the month ending April 30th, 2020, the township's expenditures were $2,284,147.94, and our receipts were $2,342,901.65. The ending cash balance of $22,060,722.20.15 includes obligations to expenditures, payroll, regular operating costs, ongoing capital improvement, and investments. What I do request is a motion to approve the receipts, warrants, payroll expenditures, update and current revenue and reports for the period ending April 30th, 2020. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. And I just want everyone to know that the financial reports are available on our website right now 24/7, and administrative offices when they're open during the weekdays. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burning. Next, moving on to departmental action and discussion items. Mr. Gilbert, do you have a report for us this evening?
I do, a brief one at that, Mr. Honolulu. As we've talked before, the agenda is fairly light today, no action items other than the resolutions that we typically pass on a monthly basis. The reason for that is, as I've explained, is this time of year generally is slow for us anyway, but in particular, given the shutdown with the private sector, it's extremely slow from an external standpoint and needing action or approval by the board for certain things. We have been very busy internally dealing with the response to the pandemic, whether it be through personnel protocols and processes, or dealing with how to interact with the public when we weren't able to do it in a face-to-face manner. But we did open the buildings to the public last Monday, and I think while the trickle is slow, they are starting to come in and engage with business with the township. However, I still think as the saying goes, and Kathleen and I talked about this earlier today, is that necessity is the mother of invention. And I think as a result of this, what we're going to see is a lot of interaction between us and the public, probably for a long period to come, and maybe forever, on certain things will be done digitally or remotely. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. However, I think we still would like to engage with the public in a little more personal manner, I think, going forward. But we have been very busy behind the scenes ensuring that the township is positioned to come out of this pandemic in a position that is as least disruptive as possible in terms of operations, and more importantly in terms of financially. And I think we are in a good position, as I've explained to staff and to the board, and hopefully to the public in some of the communications that we've done through our e-news and social media sites, is that because of sound fiscal planning by this board, as well as some management and fiscal conservatism by our department heads, and us being proactive and limiting our expenditures when we've seen that the downturn in the economy was going to be happening, it looks like we will be in a as good a position as possible as we get to the third and fourth quarter and then into 2021. I think at this time it's still unknown what the impacts will be in totality across all of our budgets. We are planning for a 10% reduction in property tax, a 20-25% reduction in joint economic development zone revenue or income tax revenue. But even with those reductions, I think, again, we should be in a good position to finish out this year and still have money to operate in through 2021. However, one of the things that this board is acutely aware of is that even prior to the pandemic, we were discussing the necessity of running a police and fire levy at the end of this year. The need for that hasn't gone away. Obviously, it's only been exacerbated because of the reduction in revenue that we're undoubtedly going to experience later this year and probably even through next year. So the question still remains whether or not we run that levy at the end of this year or try and limp through to get it done in 2021. I think we have time to make that determination up until August, but we will still continue to evaluate that. Consideration of the economy, consideration of what everyone's going through in this community in terms financially will surely be taken into account. However, I think it's still important to realize that these, labor-intensive departments in police and fire have went over 10 years without an increase in revenue, which is what necessitated the levy discussion to begin with. It's hard to operate departments that, have in combination over 100 employees for over 10 years without an increase in revenue. And they've done a phenomenal job of managing their budget to extend those levies more than twice what they were originally intended to do. And I think, for us to go another year or two would really put us in a tight situation. So I don't envy the position that the board is in, especially having to make that decision to put a levy on during probably one of the worst economic times in certainly our lifetime, if not the history of this country. However, in order for us to maintain continuity of service and the levels of service that this community expects and deserves, that decision will have to be made sooner than later. So we will do everything we can, and we have been, which is why we put those measures in place at the beginning of this pandemic to stretch those dollars as far as we can by limiting all non-emergency spending, not hiring. We have three vacancies right now in the police department that we haven't filled just because we want to make sure that we can have enough operating revenue to get through next year if we need to, if that decision to put a levy on the ballot isn't prudent at this time. So, if an increase isn't realized in the next year or two, cuts will have to be made. But we're hoping that the economy turns around. We're being optimistic. Again, this is the one time that I think being a bedroom community financially actually helps us. If you would have asked me last year if being a bedroom community is good for us financially, I would have said no. But now it is, because the disruption is minimal to us, unlike some other communities where they're heavily dependent on income tax, or like a county or a state where they're dependent on sales tax, where we're not. This economy and the issues that they're experiencing now, we're sort of buffered from because we don't depend on those types of revenues. So this is probably the one and only time being a bedroom community actually helps us financially. But again, very busy behind the scenes, just doing work to make sure that we come out on the other side of this as best as we can, which I think the agenda is a little bit misleading that, well, there's nothing going on. There's a lot going on. It just doesn't require an agenda item. So with that being said, looking at the personnel update, we had one retirement and one resignation. Joe Powers in the police department retirement. It was actually a disability retirement. He was with us just for a few years. His date is April 17th of 2020. And then a resignation of Brian Ewell in the police department, and resignation May 1st, 2020. And I would say that that resignation by Brian was because he accepted a position as the assistant city administrator in Springfield. So I congratulate Brian. I know that's something he's worked toward for a long time. And I think it speaks to the credibility of this police department and this township that we continue to cultivate leaders here, and they go on to take other positions in other communities to lead those organizations. And while it's a loss for us, I think it's also a feather in the cap of this organization that we have several former employees of the police department in particular that have went off and led other police departments, and or in this case, second in command of the city of Springdale. So while we know by cultivating leaders, eventually we're going to lose them because obviously not everyone can be a leader in this organization, but we try and create leaders and knowing that if they leave, that's the price of having an organization that trains people to lead. So we're very proud of that and wish Brian much success. Looking at community events and programs, unfortunately, we had to cancel several events and programs due to the pandemic, and those are listed on Arch Connect's website. But, however, we're hopeful that we can pull off some of these events with good social distancing. The first one obviously won't be a problem with that, in that it's going to be done online through Facebook Live, and that would be Puppets for Lunch at Home Edition, as Arch Connect is calling it. That would be June 5th. And then on July 16th and July 30th, we are looking at doing outdoor movies in the moonlight. And we're still determined whether or not maybe we do that in a drive-in concept or we do that on the lawn. I think we could probably provide good social distancing even if we did it on the lawn. So we're trying to continue with that program. And while we're exploring additional classes and offerings later in the summer, and this is a very fluid situation, so every week we're monitoring what's going on, and then we'll make determinations on events as close as we can. Other than that, and speaking to the departmental activity reports, you'll see in the zoning department, and we talk about things happening behind the scenes, we issued permits with valued investments into this community of over $3.5 million just in the last month. That's because two new developments are happening, be the Christ Medical Office Building that's going to happen at the corner of Winton and Compton, and then also a new Bank of America banking institution there in front of Brentwood Plaza. So while the economy isn't great, we here obviously have positioned ourselves and are continuing forward with new developments that are bringing private investment into this community. So I think, again, hopefully we're in a good position and we'll have a strong third and fourth quarter and a fantastic 2021. With that, the board has copies of all the departmental activity reports, and unless there are any questions, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Gilbert. We appreciate all your hard work during these difficult times that all of us are going through. Moving on then to our resolutions this evening. The first resolution we have is resolution number 43, 2020, declaring nuisances pursuant to Ohio Revised Code section 505.87 at various listed properties within Springfield Township and authorizing statutory actions necessary to abate the nuisances. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Ms. McFarland. Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Burning?
Aye.
Mr. Honolo?
Aye.
Resolution carries. And I apologize, Christie.
No worries.
Caught him napping
He
again.
said that for quite a few years.
Yes. My bad.
That's all right.
Next, we have resolution number 44, 2020, establishing assessment for abatement of nuisance and certifying same to the Hamilton County Auditor. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Burning?
Aye.
Mr. Honolo?
Aye.
Resolution carries.
Next on our agenda, we have old business. Does anyone have any old business before the board?
I do not.
I do not.
I just have one thing I wanted to say, and this has to do with the tornado that touched down in parts of the township on April the 8th. And, I just want to say crews from our police, fire, and public works worked together responding to multiple reports of structural damage and downed trees. We engaged the service department, engaged in public works department, engaged in storm damage cleanup, and we cleaned an estimated 5,650 cubic yards of brush were removed from 650 township properties. Our staff worked 252 hours of overtime, and the total number of labor hours utilized was 1,756. And I know, Christy, you were out there helping the public works crews, and I can tell you that from everyone that I've spoken to, there were a lot of people that were very grateful that the township got out and pitched in and gave them a hand with some pretty significant damage in parts of our township.
Yeah, I was out with Mike Gould, our Director of Infrastructure, that evening, just shortly after the storm went through. The level of coordination and cooperation among our departments was phenomenal. We had an individual from the Fire Department and the Public Works Department here in our Emergency Operations Center relaying information out to the individuals in the field so that they could not duplicate calls for service, and that they could send our resources to the areas in most need. We had police officers out spotting things, relaying information back, and all being coordinated by one central hub here at our EOC. It made for a very quick response, a very efficient response, and while I know how professional and I know the level of detail and determination and simply, again, just phenomenal job our employees do every day, until you actually see them in action without being, frankly, even told what we need to do, they just know what needs to be done, and they jump into action. I think sometimes you forget the level of professionalism that we have here working and providing service to this community. So I was proud and very impressed by what they did.
It was amazing for me to be a part of it and to actually witness, again, kind of reinforcing what you said, Mr. Gilbert, how hard and how dedicated our staff are here at the township, and just to see the level of just emotion that came from residents, from just by us being there. Too many people knew that I was a trustee. They just knew that I was out there helping, and that was my goal. I just wanted to help and to our residents and help our township employees. And there was a resident that I was speaking with, and he was just almost in tears by the gratitude for our Public Works Department for being out there helping. And he said he's lived in other places, but he has never lived in a community quite to the level of Springfield Township, and he will never, ever leave Springfield Township. So kudos, and my hats off go to Mike Gould and all of his staff. It was just phenomenal, and it made me proud to be a member of this organization.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Davis. One other thing I did want to say, and we kind of, with all this pandemic stuff going on, we don't really talk about it so much, but I know I do occasionally get cards or letters from residents about the great job that some of our departments have done. I got one this last month from one of our residents on Renard who was apparently near death, and the life squad came and got him, and EMS treated him, took him to the hospital, and he's fine. He's fine now, but he was just singing the praises of the fire department. So
And one more thing
if
I want to say.
anybody's listening, I want them to know that.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Joe. But in addition to our Public Works Department and how they handled the tornado, I also want to thank our police department and our fire department for all of their hard work. I know, that's their job. They're supposed to do it, but it's a selfless act. Not too many people will be brave enough to put themselves in harm's way to do their job every single day for the residents of the township. And I want to thank Chief Leininger and his staff, and Chief Browder and his staff throughout this whole COVID-19 pandemic. So just wanted to say that as well.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
With that, do we have any new business?
No, sir.
And seeing that we do not have anyone here from the public this evening, there is no citizens' participation. Our next regular meeting will be June the 9th, 2020. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.